The Red Web Superhero Talk Show. I'm your host, Brad West, and joining me today are Greg Burrow from Dragons Are Comics and Fantasy and Anastasia Anderson. And it is our Halloween week. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, guys.
We are talking about Spawn this week. He is our Halloween character focus. The horror hero Spawn. Todd McFarlane's creation from 1992 that he originally came up with, as we learned, in high school in 1977. So this is a character that is, it's his bread and butter character. One of the things I was reading, some of the, going back in some of the collected editions, I love reading some of the little blurbs by McFarlane. And it's funny because, like I said, he's not... he's not Jeff Johns level ego as far as I'm concerned, but he's got a little bit of an ego. He earned it a lot of the time, to be sure. But one of the little blurbs he's talking about, he's like, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but, it's like, how many characters get up to 300 issues? Especially a creator-owned character, independent of Marvel or DC.
And he's been in control of that character since the beginning. So he's had other people write for that character,
guest writers, guest
he's
artists
always
and stuff.
had his hand in there.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Stan Lee stopped on Spider-Man after 100 issues.
Yeah, he stopped originally after 100 issues.
Yeah,
he came back every once in a while after that.
Just do a little story, but he never was
here
really...
and there, but he never really was part of the full,
Yeah. But for God's sake, how many stories did he have his hand in at the same time? It blows my mind thinking about the original Marvel crew, the Marvel bullpen, the original Marvel bullpen, considering how many books they were putting out with how few people.
And I think that's one of the reasons that Todd McFarlane managed to maintain the longevity. He had been quoted one time as saying, he's like, I don't want to be a one-trick pony, but at the same time, I want to do something and do it well. He always said he dreamed of having his characters outlive him. He wants Spawn. He wants Spawn to be like Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse is still alive and well, and Walt Disney is dead.
Yeah.
And he wants Spawn to be that for him, and it very much is going to be. Like as we established earlier this week, it only took like 5 short years before he was already in all kinds of other media.
Also you have to realize with Todd McFarlane, he's got his McFarlane Toys imprint. Mm-hmm. He's got his Image imprint. He's got, and then of course you've got Spawn, but Image is going to last way beyond.
Now I remember back in the day, one of my favorite things, and I don't know why baseball, because he's Canadian, and he loved hockey and stuff, and he actually bought his own hockey team, but for some reason, he just, like back in the day in the 90s, like all the rap stars were like investing in diamonds or whatever and stuff. Like he decided he was going to invest in world record, because in the 90s, oh my God, I'm not a sports guy. Anna, check this for me. The most home runs ever hit. The most home runs ever hit. Who did that?
Probably Babe Ruth.
No. Baseball. It was in the 90s.
Most home runs of all time. Barry Bonds.
Barry Bonds. And he had bought Barry Bonds' record-breaking home run baseball, and something like $1 million.
We all have our one.
And he ended up with like 3 or 4 record-breaking baseballs, like $1 million baseballs. And I remember everybody was making fun of him for like, it's like, what are you doing? And I'm like thinking to myself, I'm like, you know what? He's got money. He probably didn't ever have money like this before. He certainly didn't have money like this when he was working for Marvel and DC. Yeah. Let the man enjoy his money.
Right? Of all the silly things I would buy, I'm like, I can't be mad.
I was like, let the man enjoy it.
Well, talking about legacy, we're talking about Spawn legacy for this week's episode. Today's episode.
Yep. So,
yes.
In legacy, now, it did have a few spin-offs. It didn't turn into its own universe. Now, like I said, in the inception of the Image comics is like each of these creators was going to have their own creator-owned. And Todd McFarlane, Greg made a great point earlier. Todd McFarlane really did try to have the best of both worlds. He wanted to have the creators own their creations, but he envisioned an Image universe where these characters interacted and crossed over, and they had a couple.
And then actually elevated each other, much like Marvel Comics. Like if a book is flagging, often what they'll do is they'll like have a character show up in another comic book.
And they'll guest star them.
Guest star them. And then like say, hey, if you want to find out what happened here, then go to this comic. If you want to find out what happened here, go to this comic.
Yeah.
And then that would bump up the sales of books that were not selling as well because people would go, oh, what's happening over here? Yeah. And they'd go buy this book to find out what was happening.
And McFarlane, I mean, even from the very first issue that McFarlane spawned, you know, the opening page, and this is an element of the comic books I was talking to Anna that I really think would play well in modern movie, is they have these 3 reporters, and it's 3 different levels of media. There's your CNN-style, hard-hitting, you know, we're going to be serious news outlet that's trying to be responsible journalism. And then you have your Fox News affiliate kind of sensationalism, shock value. What is
Alex Jones?
Yes, exactly. You know, and he's talking about conspiracies and stuff like that. And then you have this third one, it's like basically entertainment television, where it's like, it's fluff, and they're talking about like what the superheroes are wearing this year, and how fabulous Wanda looked in her dress at Al Simmons' funeral, and all this, and who's that man on her arms, and all this stuff. It was really, really funny. And so, and I kind of missed that aspect of it, and watching the other versions and everything, I'm like, you know, I think it would work now, because especially with our social media, those are the 3 kinds of media you have. You have your attempts, at least, at serious journalism. Then you have their, like, you know, it's all a conspiracy, you know, and then there's the, like, you know, clickbait fluff. Right. And it feels like that's something that would really make sense, you know, and I could see that as a great exposition tool. And even
you can get away with it.
And you can get away with it. And even reading the new Spawn universe, which we're going to talk about later this week, they still carry that over. And to see how that evolved from the first issue, here 300 plus issues later, it's really an interesting aspect of it. And so to see that interaction and everything, and have those other characters come over, and they brought off mention in this little news article, and they're talking about the beginning, is that they mentioned, you know, this mysterious dragon that appeared. And we have, like, in Chicago, a dragon, an actual dragon, fins and all, folks.
Right, wow.
And they're talking about Youngblood, which is, of course, the Rob Liefeld comic book, too, and everything, you know, and they're introducing them in the characters. And then they do, even as we talked earlier this week, some of the key characters in the development of Spawn, he even used some of his co-creators' characters as part of his story, and kind of bit him in the butt, like Greg was saying when we were talking off screen. He's like, yeah, well, it seems like, you know, Todd McFarlane was trying hard to, you know, elevate everybody else, and they kind of screwed him. And then like, well, that's because they kind of did.
Yeah.
Right. It's like when it came time to pony up and be like, hey, let's do something together, they were like, nah, thanks.
Yeah, there was like, I remember there was like one big Image crossover miniseries. And it kept getting delayed because they couldn't get everybody on board with everything at the same time.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, so it was because like it was like the first couple of issues came out. It was like months before the next one came out because you know they couldn't all agree on anything, you know, and stuff. Again, except for of course you know Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson, and, you know they managed to keep that. And then like we've noticed, Top Cow has been produced under them and has still, you know, so Darkness and Witchblade have managed to stay in the house there. And but you know, when you were asking me about my favorite Image comics, I had forgotten that Top Cow was part of Image.
Well, actually, Sunstone is Top Cow.
Is Sunstone Top Cow now?
Yeah, all of Stefan Sajic's stuff is Top Cow because he actually is from. He's over there in the Eastern Bloc. Europe.
Okay. I just remember I did really like Witchblade, and I liked Darkness more than Witchblade, and it was really interesting because he came out from that time of the, you know, everybody's super gritty and everything, but he actually was more interesting. He wasn't like Punisher-y. The Darkness is a character that I always thought would make a good transition over. Yeah. But yeah, so the Image comic characters and stuff of that nature. But they did manage to have some small spin-offs.
And this first one is really interesting because we were talking last episode about Neil Gaiman and Angela.
And Angela, the character of Angela.
And it's really hilarious because Neil Gaiman also co-created Medieval Spawn at the same time he was creating Angela.
Yeah, and I had forgotten that was actually part of the deal that ended up giving Gaiman the rights to Angela is because, remember I said, McFarlane was like, screw it, take it. No, he part of the deal was he's like, okay, that's fine, I'm keeping Medieval Spawn. So even though Gaiman still gets credit for co-creating Medieval Spawn does actually still belong to McFarlane. In fact,
and the Spawn universe.
And he just appeared in the new Spawn universe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because Medieval Spawn is really interesting because he was actually like a 16th century knight, and he becomes Hellspawn, and he actually gets sucked into the Top Cow universe, where he actually teams up with the medieval era Witchblade. And and then after he completes a mission there, he gets sucked back into the medieval England again, and Angela hunts him down and kills him.
Now, one of the things I find that's interesting to talk about Medieval Spawn is I had, from the movies, I didn't really read Medieval Spawn. I didn't make it that far, and I stopped collecting when Medieval Spawn got really big and everything. I had always assumed that Cagliostro, by the way that they introduced him in the movie, was Medieval Spawn.
Yeah, no.
That's kind of the impression I was getting.
And I don't know if maybe they kind of mushed a little bit of that element into them.
To finish off Medieval Spawn, then what happened is that in modern day, Al Spawn actually did something and brought Medieval Spawn back. So he resurrected him in modern times.
Okay.
So that's how modern Spawn got to modern day.
Okay. So Medieval Spawn was in modern day. It wasn't just in the past.
He was introduced in the past, and then he was brought
forward.
Okay,
so I always just assumed it was like flashback stories, this is an alternate verse if we wanted to talk about, but no, he was in the modern times. That's interesting. Yeah. I didn't remember that part. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. But yeah, so Medieval Spawn was one of them, and he also was one of the more popular variants of the action figures. I know that I saw the action figure many times.
I mean, it does look cool.
Yeah.
It does look cool.
Now, my favorite, as we were talking about before, I like the characters of Sam and Twitch. They actually got spun off into their own comic book. Theirs was mostly just like a police procedural with, murders and crimes that had a little bit of something
and
extra.
Guess who wrote the first half of the series?
And yes, we just realized today, Brian Michael Bendis, co-creator of Miles Morales and the Ultimate Spider-Man universe and a host of other interesting things, was the first writer on the Sam and Twitch series. And unfortunately, eventually that one too, after I think he stopped at issue 10 and the new writers had a hard time keeping up with the schedule, so it ended up getting canceled by number 19 or something because it got produced so sporadically.
And unfortunately, that's one of the things with Image titles is that, there's a couple of books that I've really enjoyed. There's Mercenary Sea that I absolutely loved, and they only did like 5 issues, just enough to do a trade paperback, and then they canceled it because they just couldn't keep up with the schedule.
Yeah.
And then also Saga. Saga was on hiatus for, I must say, like 2 years, and it's finally coming back, guys. So if you're into Saga, it's coming back. So that's.
But you know what? It's that whole adage of people wait for a good thing. It is kind of frustrating, and you got to be careful not to lose your readership. But at the same time, you don't. If you're your own creative and you're wanting to make it and you're wanting to craft something. There's something to be said for not being forced by a corporate entity to churn something out, And sometimes creators need a break. I mean, McFarlane, his answer was to have guest writers and stuff come in and stuff progress, so he wouldn't get burnt out. But sometimes some of these creators are creating their own stuff. They just need a break from burnout or whatever. Yeah. I know that was kind of the deal with Robert Kirkman for Walking Dead. The reason there were gaps in that is because he just would get burnt out for a while, And we'll talk about Robert Kirkman here in a minute more too. But Walking Dead was also an Image title.
Yeah.
And he did Invincible and stuff too. But yeah, Sam and Twitch was a good spin-off. In fact, it was such a good spin-off that at one point BBC was trying to get Kevin Smith to script a Sam and Twitch series.
Wow.
You know what? He could do it. As
Yeah.
much as I'm like, he could do it.
Well, that's interesting. And as we've said now, Jeremy Renner will be playing Twitch in the Salmon Twitch. I mean,
Right.
I think he's going to do a brilliant job.
It'll be interesting.
I want to see. He will do a good job, depending on who they cast as Sam.
Like I said, yeah, exactly. The same.
That's definitely an ensemble.
It's there has to be chemistry between those
They
characters.
bounce off each other,
Yeah.
and it's
It has to be between-
Jeremy Renner's good working with other people,
With other
so it's like I accept that he's Twitch, but you have to pick a good Sam.
If you've seen him in Hurt Locker and some other things, he's got a lot of range. I
He
really
does.
think that people are not giving him roles where he.
Oh, I even kind of liked Hansel and Gretel. Have
Yeah.
you ever seen
I
that?
did like Hansel.
I'm actually really looking forward to the
Hawkeye
Hawkeye series because I
yeah.
think that they're going to give him a chance to really
It
stretch.
looks
there.
like it's going to be huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what other Spawn legacy spinoff do we?
Okay, so the one I found is actually called Shadows of Spun, and it is basically Spawn, but a Japanese manga adaptation. Instead of Al, this is a guy named Ken Kurosawa who was a scrappy kid that worked in a gang, and when he chose to work in a rival gang for more money, he gets killed in like a car bomb or something.
Damn.
But he, instead of it being like his wife, his sister is sick, and so he dies, and they're like, "You want to go see your sister again? Let's do this stuff." And when he comes back, she's not only good, she has moved on as becoming a big like movie star or something. So this is like an after Al Simmons type thing. So there's a lot of like they're not playing around as much. They're like, oh no, we're gonna skip all the steps we had to deal with this, and we're just gonna go straight into trying to send you to hell as quickly as possible. And it's interesting. It did not have a very good reception because if you have followed manga a lot as much as me and Greg have, it's not the prettiest.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those, it's not the prettiest, and there were a lot of reviews where it's like, the story is not that good, but it's interesting to look at. Like, it's like, this is something that became such a huge phenomenon. It's like, I think it happened in like 1998.
Oh, really?
So it's like, we have it started, we had the movie, and then shortly after the movie, they were like, we're going to have a Japanese adaptation.
Yeah, the
this.
Salmon Twitch book didn't come until 2000.
Yeah, it's surprising. Like,
Interesting.
yeah.
And then the last one is an interesting character that I actually enjoyed, and he only came out about 5 or 6 years ago. A character named Haunt. Haunt was the first new McFarlane created character in years, and it was the first new image. It was basically the first ongoing series because all the other ones. Medieval Spawn was a mini-series. Shadows of the Spawn was just like a mini-series. Salmon Twitch was an ongoing series. And had a couple of mini-series after that. But Haunt was the first ongoing series in years that McFarlane Productions had tried to put out. And he co-created it with Robert Kirkman, who had also been publishing in Image. He'd been publishing The Walking Dead and Invincible and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And the character, I thought it was kind of cool. He kind of reminded me a little bit of Brother Voodoo from Marvel Comics. Because they have kind of a similar thing. Whereas Brother Voodoo, he was like he there was the good brother, and then his brother was not as good, and he dies, and he ends up getting haunted by the spirit of his brother, and he starts using that to do magical power. And this is kind of a similar thing. Basically, the character of Haunt he's a priest. He's a priest, and his twin brother. Disappears and keeps going off, and then he has no idea what his brother's doing, and then all of a sudden his brother's ghost shows up and starts haunting him and taking over his body, and then these bad guys come after him and thinking he's his brother because they're twins. He's like, oh, you're this guy and you're just pretending to be a priest in disguise. You find out his brother was this super spy who had gotten involved with like this supernatural doings and died and ended up coming back. So anyway, he basically has to bond with his brother's ghost to create this, like, kind of, it's similar to Spawn's, like, necroplasm thing. It's an ectoplasm thing, I guess. They don't call it that, but it's like, he's got this ghost, he's got kind of a ghost powers thing. And it was an interesting book. It didn't last that long. And the reason that this really is an interesting thing with Spawn is that it's in the Spawn universe properly. And once, like Greg said, once it started kind of to go down a little bit, they started crossing it over directly into Spawn. And when the book was canceled, they actually just imported him wholesale. And he became, for a while, he became a supporting character in the Spawn comics.
Oh, okay.
So,
neat.
Anyway, it was a different take on, like I said, I like the Brother Voodoo concept, but I kind of like the pacing of this when I read it. I only read like the first 5 issues of it,
Right.
but it was kind of fun. So anyway, that's some of the Spawn legacy and comic books. And tomorrow is our last day of Spawn. We're going to go into the future of Spawn, where it's coming from now, what's new, and what you can look forward to. So thank you for joining us. Make sure you go under bradsandredweb.com, check us out, and look for us in the future installments. We love you, and we'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Bye.
Have fun, guys. Bye.